Hello and welcome back to the Sedex Conference 2017 live stream. I'm joined now by Heather Franzese from Goodwill Solutions and Antoine Heuty from Ulula. Welcome both of you. Thanks for being with us today. Starting with a personal question, why did you get into this space? And in answering, perhaps you can also introduce the organisations you're from. Heather, you first?
Yeah, so I've been working with manufacturing supply chains for over 10 years, and in visiting factories I've seen some really terrible conditions. I remember in particular a water bottle factory where the fumes were so toxic that I had a headache after 5 minutes, young workers, and it was very visible. At the same time, I've seen factories that look fantastic, but when you scratch the surface and talk to workers, you see that they're not being paid on time, or things like that. So, I really wanted to be able to address some of these issues, not just the ones you can see, but the ones that you can't see as easily. And I started to see a few years into working with manufacturing that workers had cell phones on the production lines. So I thought there must be a way that we can use this technology to connect more directly with workers in real time. So that's why we, 6 years ago, set up the LaborLink platform. And we've surveyed over 1 million workers in 16 countries in the last 6 years, using mobile technology to give workers a more anonymous channel to report what's really happening in the factories.
Fantastic. Thank you. Antoine?
So thanks for having me. I started my career 15 years ago, and I've basically been working on transparency and accountability in supply chains, a lot focusing on raw materials. And through that work, I was pushing for transparency in policies, systems, but I really thought that you have to do more to really provide tangible change to the communities and the workers where these supply chains are originating. And so 4 years ago, I felt that seeing the examples of how mobile phones are widespread and used for so many purposes for good in emerging markets, why not try to bring that in the supply chains that I know best and some of the places where I worked. And so we started Ulula with the idea of creating a two-way engagement platform where we wanted to give a way for workers and for communities to send their feedback unstructured in some ways, and then we evolved that into survey platform and model tool where you could structure your engagements differently. And since then, we've been working in the food and beverage supply chains, in mining sector, in about 12 countries at the moment, and we've gathered quite about over 1 million data points at the moment. It's good, exciting.
Fantastic. So, to follow on from that, I suppose, why use a worker survey rather than developing worker representation through unions or through committees, for example?
So, the notion of using worker surveys to create, good data streams for that can go and be shared with unions and worker committees. So it's absolutely complementary, and I think when we see change on the ground is when we have unions, factory owners, buyers working together, and we really feel that the kinds of data that we generate, it's actionable, it's reliable, it's timely, so it enables people to have a conversation and to decide what makes sense, what should we change to make business works better and have better workplace and more happier workers
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this technology can enable worker representatives and unions to actually do their job better, to be able to understand and represent the needs of workers.
Sure. Great. A question to you both now. What are the most significant changes an organisation has made as a direct result of conducting a mobile survey for workers that you've experienced in your organisations? Heather?
Yeah, so we just released a report in November from our LaborLink China collaborative, which had 70 factories, under 10 brands and retailers, and the focus was really around job satisfaction and turnover. And over the 2-year period of the program, we were able to see and measure a 10% reduction in turnover and a 15% reduction in workplace stress. So those are indicators that are not only valuable for brands and retailers, but really for the supplier in terms of business outcomes for them, and being able to retain workers and see higher productivity and product quality as a result of that job satisfaction.
Some really nice concrete impacts there.
So, I mean, an example for us would be we've been working in the fishing sector in South Africa, and in the first place we found pretty horrendous, examples of bad health and safety behaviors and reports and conditions, high levels of discrimination and bullying in the workplace, and that was a shock to the buyers and the suppliers. And what we saw in subsequent measurement is a strong change specifically on health and safety and grievance mechanisms. They took action. They actually went about it differently in each of the sites that we were working with. But what we saw eventually is a reduction in equipment downtime by a third. So that's direct business gains for these people, and a decrease of 50% in reported discrimination and bullying. So I think more on the social side, but I think also translating into more productive workforce and less turnover.
So it's a win-win situation for
Yes.
both parties, really. Great. Finally, what are your thoughts on the future of worker engagement technology? Where do you see it going in your field?
I think about kind of three different futures. So a dark one, a sensible one, and a radical one. I would say, on the dark side, we could see what we've already seen with auditing and the proliferation of different codes and standards, something that Sedex has obviously tried to address and has made some headway with. But we could very easily see something similar with worker voice technology, with each company asking different questions, going about it in a different way, and then really inefficient use of resources, leading to then not a lot of impact for workers. I think a second path, the sort of sensible future, would be a focus on human resource management, because in that way suppliers can really take ownership of this data and use it for their business purposes, and drive change that then is in turn reducing risk for brands and retailers, but without being focused so much on compliance topics. And then I would say lastly, a kind of radical future, we're looking at emerging technologies like mobile telepresence robots, and other natural language processing and bots to be able to kind of reinvent the audit process for what we call worker-centric audit alternatives, which integrates mobile survey technology with mobile telepresence robots for physical inspection and other emerging technologies to potentially, totally reinvent what we know of auditing today.
Yeah, sounds exciting. I want to be there. So it will happen.
Yeah.
Great.
So, I mean, to pick up on Heather, I think we want to build a better future. I think we're all on that page, and so the technology is changing all the time, and I think what we're seeing is that collecting data is going to get cheaper because you have more people on smartphones or social media, so the cost is getting lower. The Internet of Things is there upon us, so you may have robots, you may have drones, you may have things that are scary and great at the same time, depending on how you use it. And I think the potential that it represents, I think, to be honest, I think it will require more than just tech gigs. It will require collaboration at, I would say, on three levels. One is collaboration with industry associations and leaders like Sedex, and we're seeing that in other sectors. And we also, as providers, we're also trying to come together to facilitate that process and accelerate it. So I think that's one that will enable standardization of questions. The second is integration with the auditing profession in general, and finding ways of using our tools for worker interviews, for verification of remediation plans, and in other aspects of this work, so that we can scale, we can have much better data and much more actionable data, and something that you can rely on. I think the third one is with civil society, because the pace of change is not fast enough, and we see that corporations tend to react and when they get a little bit pushed by civil society, and I think the implication of having very cheap data and so many sources of data is that we can find new partnerships, strike partnerships with civil society, where we have a strong comparative advantage in collecting data. They have a strong comparative advantage in pushing for change, and I think we can work together with them and with the brands, so that all together we can make that better future that Heather is talking about is something that's a reality.
Great. Well, we look forward to seeing what the future holds. Hopefully you come back to the Sedex Conference 2018 and tell us how you've been getting on in your progress. Thank you very much for being with us today. And thank you for joining the live webcast at Sedex 2017.